Welcome to Inventive Minds Child, Youth, and Family Support Center. We are a not-for-profit organization working with families in their day-to-day parenting by providing workshops and seminars related to pediatric and child development. Inventive Minds provides care in the early years sectors for newborn to age 6, licensed under the Ministry of Education all across Ontario. Inventive Minds carries an elementary school open to international students from junior kindergarten to grade 3. The Inventive Minds Family Center helps families in mediation, arbitration, and parent coordination cases related to family separation and divorce. We support families during and past separation and divorce. Inventive Minds works with court orders to conduct child voice report and parenting courses related to CAS, court, and mediation purposes. To learn more about our services, reach us at inventivekids.com. My name is Rose, the founder of Inventive Minds Family Center.
Thank you so much for joining this Inventive Minds Child, Youth, and Family Support Center workshop hosted by me, Adam Stavis, your youth development mentor and coach. Today we have two guest speakers with us, which is awesome. Alyson Schafer, who you should know very well by now. She's a regular here. She is an Adlerian family counselor, author, and internationally acclaimed expert who empowers families by sharing her principles, rules, and tools for raising cooperative and resilient kids. Alyson's education background includes a B.Sc, MA Counseling, OACCPP Masters of Arts Counseling from the Adler School of Chicago, and an honors Bachelor of Science from the University of Waterloo. Alyson is also an international TEDx speaker and an international best-selling author of 3 parenting books published by HarperCollins Canada, Breaking the Good Mom Myth, Honey, I Wrecked the Kids, and her latest, Ain't Misbehavin. We also have Marilyn Popescu. Marilyn is the executive director of the Ontario Association for Family Mediation, or better known as OAFM. As an OAFM accredited family and elder mediator and child protection mediator in private practice, she works to bring peaceful resolutions that help families adapt to challenges and changes across the life cycle. Marilyn is also a roster mediator for the Office of Independent Police Review Director and the Ministry of Government and Consumer Affairs. Okay, so welcome.
Thank you. Yeah,
it's such a pleasure to be here with you and to meet you. Thank you for all the work
Very
you've done.
much,
I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise. Thank you.
This is going to be great. We have a lot of questions to go through. So let's just get right into it here. This question is specifically geared to Alyson, but of course, Marilyn, if you have anything that you want to add into this as we're going through it, then please do. So do all divorcees experience a grief reaction, Alyson?
I know sometimes getting out of a marriage can feel like relief. And you're like, thank goodness, wash my hands of that. It's not necessarily just about the loss and the ending of the relationship with your partner. There's so much more that happens. And so it could be that you are grieving the dream of being married, the loss of your in-laws who you might have really liked, and now there's a different arrangement with them. It could be because you had to relocate, that you're missing your old house, or your children suddenly have like a different school and you really like the neighborhood. So there's so many things that get rearranged that it's pretty predictable that in all of that, even if it's not the person, if it was a contentious, angry, so glad you got out of their situation, there's just so much change that inevitably there's going to be something that you're going to grieve as loss in that change process. So I think we should anticipate that it's going to be part of it, yes.
And it's really important to look for what you really went through and take some time to be mindful of the whole process as well.
Yeah, this really speaks to resiliency. It takes a lot of courage to move into a healthier state. And if that healthier state is that you can't be together anymore, to go into ambiguity, to let go of all these things that have been your pillars and your tethers. In my profession, because I get to watch people go through the process, I have to give them an incredible amount of hope to say, you have what it takes. So many people have been through this. I promise you, and we meet together again in a year or in 2 years or whatever, I believe that you have all those qualities that will see you through and there will be a brighter day. And I have to kind of hold that hope for my clients and to normalize this is the dark, deep time you're in. But you got to do the work of getting through it. It doesn't mean you don't have it within you. It's just, it is part of the process.
Now, from your side of things, Marilyn, is there anything that you'd like to touch upon and that you've noticed from your perspective when it comes to the grieving process?
All couples, I think, grieve. And even if half of the couple decided, hey, this is over, let's call it, we'd like to start mediation and go through a separation, that person has also grieved. That can be one of the hardest, most difficult things for the other person to see. because of course they chose it, and here they are going through all their grief and loss. And it can be very difficult for one partner to see the other as a person who has grieved or is grieving the loss, even though it could have been their choice.
Fair enough. What does divorce grief look like specifically, Alyson? What is the process? What does it actually feel like? What are the different steps, if you will, perhaps? What does the whole overall system of grief entail?
There was a really landmark contribution made by Kubler-Ross. Now it was around death, but it's still around grief. And she outlined these stages. We've since revisited that to think it's not quite as linear as she proposed. So I don't want to not give her thank you for the contribution to the knowledge that she gave at the time, but we have updated that. I think people just need to know that there's still value in understanding there are these different ways that grief can be expressed. And we've got denial. It's not happening. He's not leaving me. This isn't over. The pain, fear could look like anxiety. Anger, like, no way, bargaining, like, I'll get better, I'll try harder, I'll be more engaged. Guilt, oh my God, I've wrecked my children, this is all on me. Depression, like, oh, this is it, I'm done. And then finally this moving through where hopefully we get to acceptance and letting go and getting to the next phase. But it doesn't happen linearly like that. And it's not cookie cutter like that at all, can I say, as a divorced woman. Some of those things happened at some times, but they didn't happen like stage 1, the first 2 weeks. No, I'm at the grocery store and suddenly I'm really angry because I don't want to be buying these Christmas cookies because you should be here for Christmas. And then that passes and now you're on to something else. It's not linear. It doesn't have this nice map, but it's more about trying to encourage people to understand the face of grief and how you will experience it will be a unique thumbprint to how your process is, and none of it is wrong. You can go forwards and a little backwards, and so to just be really kind to yourself and say, I guess this is what's coming up for me right now. This is what I have to work on, and be accepting of that. And don't use other people's parameters or comparators to think that you're not grieving properly. And that's why we have to also accept our partner could be at a different phase. They could have moved through a lot of this phase before they even said, I want out of the marriage. And so they could be hip hop off to the next thing. And you're like, what? Did this mean nothing to you? But it could be that their process happened earlier. It could be that actually they haven't moved on. They're just looking kind of manic and like they're all happy, but they might get into depression later. Humans are just too complex. It just doesn't go that easily.
Right. Marianne, if you don't mind, is there anything in there that you feel that it would be important to include into what Alyson had to say about all that from your level of experience as well?
So from the mediator's perspective, I see this in the daily sort of sessions that I'll have. So I had a mediation earlier. It goes through all of that roller coaster of emotions. And I always say to my clients, all emotions are welcome here. It's okay to feel the way you're feeling. I love what Alyson said about just paying attention and the self-care piece. I can't stress that enough. It's really a stressful process for families. So surround yourself with love and all the extra care you can.
Now, this is sort of an extra deeper part of this question that I'm just wondering about, and I would think that perhaps this would be really important for. Do you think it would be important for anybody going through a separation divorce to be aware of all these different, potential feelings that they might have, be aware of what all of them are going to be coming up potentially for themselves, so at least that way they can build this sort of mindfulness around it, so that way if they're experiencing the anger, they can step back and say, you know what, oh, wait a minute, I know that anger is part of the process. What's happening right now is natural, is normal, is okay, is fine, and oh, wait a minute, I just had a moment of acceptance. Oh, that's good. Okay, so you can kind of being educated as to all these different types of feelings you can have throughout the whole process. Would you say that would be super helpful to anybody going through a separation and divorce? And I'm giving that question to both of you. So maybe Marianne, you can start if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I think clarity about how you're feeling and being centered to know like what's happening for me. And if it can be normalized in any way, shape, or form, I think this does help clients go through all of these processes. And also to know they won't always feel this way, right? It's going to get better, maybe in the next 10 minutes, maybe in the next 5 days or 5 months, right? So this is something for our clients to really have hope for, that this is going to be okay.
I love Marianne saying like everything's going to come up. Embrace everything. And then if you're aware that it's going to come up, You need to think about that in terms of when you're making decisions. If you're like in a manic situation, probably not a good time to buy the red convertible. If you're in an angry situation, you might not want to burn all the books that they left behind in the apartment. Or you might want to just say a lot of emotions are coming up, but they're also going to metabolize and pass on. And so maybe I shouldn't be making decisions I can't reverse in this moment. Let's just deal with the emotions. Let's not make decisions we can't reverse or regret.
Right. And also, have either one of you ever worked through sort of a journaling process with any clients when it comes to when they're in these heavy emotions? Have you ever suggested something similar to that?
Yeah, journaling is extremely important and a really good tool for parents to use to get their feelings out in a healthy way. As mediators, we look for these things and we look under these things. We know that behind anger is fear, and behind fear is actually grief, and underneath grief is love. And so when we think about helping clients to work through these things, if we dive a little deeper in mediation, this is not therapy. It's just uncovering of reasons for being stuck on something. And so we deepen to understand, and journaling is absolutely super helpful with that in between sessions.
That's so beautiful. Yeah.
I got to jump in a little bit there too, just to back this
Please.
up. I know a lot of people sort of think, oh, journaling, I'm not going to do that. There's science here, people. And if you look at the work of Penny Baker, who talks about the ways that we disclose and write, literally this is brain science, people, that when you take your ruminating thoughts and you have to translate it into language and you have to write and have motor, don't type it on a keyboard. Has to be pen in hand, has to be a motor activity. But when you take thoughts and you move them to language and then move them to a stylus of a pen, it opens up parts of the brain that allows you to process those emotions. It is a form of disclosure without ever paying a therapist. And there's actually research that shows that if you journal in a certain way, it's equally as effective as seeing a therapist. So if you want to save money, you can go to Staples for $2.99 and get a journaling book instead of paying me $200 an hour. It really works. Please look into it.
Okay, that's great. I always like the idea of not just giving information, but also at least providing a tool for anybody who's listening to this. So that way there's something not just knowledge-based, but something really tangible that you can take with you from these workshops and use it somehow in your life. And hopefully that is helpful. Next question is for Marianne. How does mediation help to acknowledge and support the grief and loss that the parents and children are experiencing?
Mediation is a super supportive process. So again, it's not therapy. It is a way for clients to talk about what matters in the past and to actually draw it to hope in the future. A lot of us are trained in a method called insight mediation. Dr. Cheryl Picard wrote an excellent book on practicing insight, which actually talks about the principle of deepening, asking questions and listening to the listener. Once we share knowledge, once we share truths with each other, we're able to hold that information. We're not able to let it go if we learn something new about each other in mediation, about the family unit, how it works. And so mediation with the couple, so the separating parents, that's really at the first level where I'm generally involved, where we're talking to the parents. I generally don't involve children. There is a focus on child inclusive mediation. That's not a big part of my practice. But what I hope is that for parents who are able to communicate and hear each other, probably for the first time in a little while, that their communication improves. And then this helps the family have a good conversation with each other and to just be able to show up for the kids in a different way, to let go some of the anger and hostility. And that, I think, trickles down to a more positive family unit and hope for like, hey, yeah, we're not going to be dating anymore, but we're certainly going to be co-parents. And what's that going to look like? And it can look really beautiful.
Right. It's all about looking forward, like how we're going to move forward through this and how can we do this in a very functional way for the sake of children, especially. Is there anything from your side, Alyson?
So a couple things there. So I like to use a metaphor. We think metaphorically, we think in terms of stories. So whenever you can go at things that way, that's helpful for kids. And so sometimes I'll use like a snow globe and I'll say like, here's your family unit. And right now we've kind of shook it up. Things are changing. But it's contained. You still have a mother who loves you. You still have a father who loves you. You still have everybody in your family unit. Nobody's going away. Everything's going to land in a different place. And right now, the snowflakes are coming to the ground. In a little bit of time, we need to plan what that's going to look like. But they're going to land, and everyone's still in your snow globe. Everyone's still in your world. And so I think that's very comforting for children. I think for parents, I have to remind them, when they come in for marriage counseling and they're sort of thinking about divorcing, I sometimes sort of have to say, you're still going to raise the children together. Getting divorced adds more problems because now you got twice the mortgage. You still need a parenting plan. You still can't communicate. You're still in power struggles. Wouldn't it be terrible that you got to take it all the way to mediation before you actually sit in front of professionals who say, you guys don't have good communication skills. And then they learn it at mediation. They're like, maybe we could have saved this marriage if we would have worked harder on this. Your problems aren't going away. You still have to figure out how to co-raise your children as mature people. And hopefully you have a child forward, children first, that they don't want to hurt their kids. They might have different ideas about what does and doesn't impact their kids. There could be differences in parenting styles and things like that, which they have to let go of now. That's your partner's house. And if he wants to give them McDonald's for lunch and you're an organic, crunchy granola person, you got to let go of that. And they couldn't let go of it when you lived under one roof. Now you got to let go of it, but live in two households. But we have to think of the kids first because that's just being humanitarian. So I think you can usually appeal to parents that way. And I think we have to really, again, to that message of hope. All the psychological research shows kids do fine if you have a good divorce. Being married or not married is not what impacts kids mentally. It's around being around people that are healthy emotionally and reflecting back to them you were loved and you belonged. Family structures can look a million different ways. You can just move through this and give those core components to your kids. They're fine. You got this.
Either way, you can't just run away from the problems. You're still going to be interacting. You're still going to have to deal with different difficulties and different challenges that you've always had to deal with. It's just going to be dealing with it now in two different houses. So you really want to ask yourself, is this something that you absolutely have to do if you can get through those difficulties with professional help? Is that going to be enough to save your marriage? And if so, that may be something that you want to think about, at least for a little bit, as to whether or not divorce and separation actually makes sense for you.
But I mean, there's a range, right? You're going to get people that when they go into these situations and they cut and run. And it's like, no, in fact, we got divorced. I never saw my father again. It can be that. Or it can be like, no, they're divorced, but they both sat and spat at each other during my graduation. It was humiliating and they just kept it up all the way through and messed me up that way. Or it could be like, no, it was so wonderful and he brought her his new partner and we all had my birthday together. Sometimes when I'm counseling families, if they really can't get this together, we need to reduce the contact and say, just make the parenting plan, use the app to just contact each other as little as possible, keep the animosity and emotionality as low as possible, and just work the plan. So just work with your mediator to make the plan so you're not constantly texting each other saying when are you picking them up and why didn't you pack his lunch? And make the decisions and then live by the decisions. It just brings everything emotionally down. Go to your mediator and get this stuff figured out. Don't relive it, rehash it, rip the Band-Aid off every day.
It sounds like, Marianne, you agree with all that Alyson is saying.
Absolutely. It's really interesting to hear, probably for people watching and listening too, that there's a lot of professionals that are available to help, right? And we've each got this message really of you're separating from the person that you chose to separate from. You didn't like a lot of those qualities of that person. And now here's what we're asking you to do, to be heroic in actually making a plan that's going to work for you to cooperate with this person that you're not so fond of at the moment. So it takes a lot of effort, and I admire all parents who choose to go through a less adversarial path and are able to work things out, even if it's high conflict at first. It can get better. The other thing is that you can make a mistake as co-parents, and the next day or year or month, it could get better.
Right.
As the emotions lessen, people are able to choose a different path. That message of hope, it is there for sure.
Okay. The next question here for Alyson to start with, how do you protect the kids from emotional issues?
This speaks to the capacity of the adult. Adults, even though they marry and have children, that doesn't necessarily mean that their emotional maturity has really been there. We don't know. We don't know the path that they've been on. We're just asking everyone to do the best that they can do, to have some awareness of the fact that a healthy emotional parent is the best thing to make an emotionally healthy child. So if you need to look after yourself, you're not being selfish by looking after yourself. You're really being the best caregiver and the most responsible parent you can be. And if you're not holding up well in the storm, to recognize that and to know that what you need is those resources like counseling. It can also just be tapping into your social network. It can be getting onto divorced families' Facebook groups and chatting with other people so that you don't feel so alone and you don't feel so isolated. You're going to have highs and lows, and you're going to want to have a rage and you're going to want to have a cry. The question is, can you manage your reactivity such that you can hold it together in front of your kids and kind of fake it till you make it. Pick them up from school like this, and when you're done, you go into your bedroom and you punch your pillow, or you have your cry, or you cry. I mean, I remember crying in the bathtub. I would like submerge myself so just my little nose was sticking out, and then I would cry after the kids had gone to bed, because where are you going to go cry when you live in a small place? But I had to let my tears out. I remember my therapist saying, you can just make a cry date. Like, the tears have to come out. So if you don't want them to come out in front of the children, you can say, between 2 and 3 every day, I'm going to put on a really sappy song. I'm going to lie in my bed. I'm going to do my little journaling, and I'm just going to get some more of my tears out. And then when I pick my kids up from school, I'd be like, okay. And it might feel a little artificial in the beginning, but the truth is what you're really doing is being judicious, and you're making good decisions, and you're managing yourself, knowing that I do need to express. I'm trying not to do it in the wrong moments. So I will find my moments when it's more appropriate, and I will get the help that I need. So I don't want anyone to numb their feelings. We don't need to turn to drugs and alcohol to try to medicate our way out of our pain. We can make responsible choices and say, yeah, I'm in a lot of pain and I don't need to break down in front of my children. And if you do, then you say, I got a lot of tears. It's okay to be sad. Things have changed, but I'm good. You never want your children to feel like you can't be a support to them, and nor do you want them to feel that they have stepped into a role where they need to caretake you.
And it goes back to what we said before about recognizing the fact that you are going to need to grieve one way or the other, and to not try to disassociate yourself with that process, to just allow yourself to do it. I also really like the idea that you talked about where it's almost having like this emotional date with yourself, where you set aside time that's just for you, where you can just think about what's actually going on, allow yourself to grieve one way or the other. It's going to come out, and it's just a matter of how is it going to come out.
That's good modeling for your kids too. Daniel Siegel has written a book called Brainstorm, and he talks about the brain and neuroplasticity and our emotions and our children. He says of the 5 like mental healthy things we need to do, self-reflection is one of them. Contemplative practices are one of them. So whether that's meditating or journaling, to take a moment and to reflect and do that in a conscientious way. If your kids see you every morning with a little cup of tea writing in a journal, what a beautiful thing to model for your kids. You're like, yeah, you know what, every day I like to do a little reflection, a little self-growth, like processing myself. You should do it too. It's a good thing.
Definitely. I think a lot of people may feel as if they want to isolate themselves while they're going through all this. I would imagine that's something that would be potentially cautioned. Would you agree with that, Marianne?
100%. I think that one of the things that happens is that people freeze. They just think, okay, I'm just going to put my head down, maybe take some actions that I need to, maybe I'll freeze on other things. And they're not able to create that circle of support around themselves as they best could if they were feeling okay. When we think about people going through grief and loss in separation and divorce, we're asking sort of monumental tasks of people. We're saying, be good to yourself. Make sure you get the supports that you need. Do the journaling, do the self-reflective practice. And these things, they take effort. And sometimes it feels like monumental effort. So sometimes working in smaller ways, right? I love everything that Alyson said. I think it's excellent advice. And sometimes it's just breaking it down into tiny pieces so you can move.
The other thing too, Marianne, is that when somebody is deeply in pain, frozen, right? Because you're talking about the limbic system and how you get into overwhelm and whatever. And then we're asking that person to go look for support. Yeah. You have to think, if we're thinking of it as a village, you need to know my best friend just got divorced and she's lying with her head in a pillow. And when I say, what can I do for you? She can't answer the question. You need to say, my friend's got her head under the pillow. I'm going to take over a casserole. I'm going to say, I'll take your kids to school today. We need to be, as a community, aware. As much as we say, ask for support, look for your support, there's people that they're so beyond being capable that we need to like reach in and just take assumptions. You might say, like, if you need anything, just call me. If you need anything, just call me. They're not going to call you. When they're that far gone, they're not going to call you. So sometimes we just really need to push our way in and bang on the door.
Play the mom and dad role for that person for just a moment in time.
Yeah, it'll mean the world to them. Don't worry about crossing a line. They'll let you know if you cross a line.
Very nice. Okay. Next question for Marianne. Can mediation work when emotions are really high?
The answer to that is it probably depends on the height of the emotions. We often think of ways to support people during mediation to prepare them for the process. I remember a mediation I did where husband said something to the wife literally fell on the floor. So I Skyped her mom in another country and the mom talked her out of it and she got up off the floor. These are extremely high emotions. What we need to do is slow down and provide support and bring her to a place where she can cope. Because one of the things that this mom didn't want to do is cry. She didn't want to cry in the mediation. She didn't want her husband to see her feel hurt. Going back, I think what I would do is plan for making sure that people were ready, paying closer attention to what's happening during intake, so that the composure can be saved until a time where they feel better and stronger, where they can sit together and talk.
And then from the counseling side of it, Alyson, how do you work through, situations where emotions are really high? What's something that you found to be super helpful?
I mean, I have seen people go to court and spend tens of thousands of dollars to argue over a $7 charge on their form because you bought a baseball cap at a game that I didn't approve. And if we're splitting the expenses, you can't just assume that that baseball cap was something that I was going to pay for. And out of my righteous indignation of you just charging me with things, I'm going to spend $10,000 to prove you wrong. So I'm divorced and I'm very good friends with my ex. And I remember while we were married, he cut this little article out of a paper. The husband and wife were arguing over the division of the Beanie Baby collection. And the judge was having to say, that Beanie Baby goes to you and that Beanie Baby goes to... And my husband then, this is before we got divorced, he said, dear God, honey, if it ever comes to this, just shoot me. And you never think you're going to get there until it's your marriage. And suddenly these things become symbolic. And I think it's really important to talk about the symbolism, what this means to you, why this is so important to you, because it's not about the cap. It's not about the Beanie Baby. This is about who's had control, who's been oppressed, who's not been heard. It's suddenly all coming to one big pustule head at the end of the marriage. I feel like part of it is about tapping into Nelson Mandela thing when they said, weren't you angry that you were imprisoned wrongly for all these years? Aren't you mad at them? And he said, oh my God, then I'd be in prison more. Where we have to start working with the person to say, I get it. You want what you want and you want to get onto happiness. Could it be that for you to get your personal goals met now in this new formulation, wouldn't it be better to let some of this go? Because then they at least just say, yes, because it's my time for happiness. Your time for happiness would be to not be contentious about this issue right now. So sometimes I have to kind of reframe things that way. This isn't like a one-time conversation.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I would like to see it as this incredible opportunity for growth. I think that's the same with kids. Like when you have a kid and your kid is pushing your buttons and they're having tantrums and you're losing your crap and your kid is like hitting you on your sore spot. So you can get mad about that, or you can say, this is where I need to investigate and get curious because maybe I have a growth opportunity here. And a lot of people come through the other end of a marriage, a separation, and mediation, and they're like, oh my God, and now I'm independent and I'm putting up light fixtures and I can do this and I went back to school. And if we just keep that optimism and say where your pain is, it can be super, super beneficial.
There's been a question that I've sometimes asked individuals when they're really attached to something in particular, when there's some real sentimental value about something, and they're going through a situation where they could potentially lose that item of sentimental value for whatever reason, whatever the reason is. Oftentimes I try to ask, depending on the circumstances, but I try to ask, what would it be like emotionally, psychologically, physically for you if you could find a way to allow that item of sentimental value to be just simply a memory and not something that you have to have physically, tangibly in your hands? How would that feel to you? And a lot of times I get the answer, well, that would be great if I could do that. That would be amazing. If I could do that and not be so attached to this, I wouldn't have to feel all these awful emotions surrounding the fact that I can't have it. And sometimes that is just the fact that they say something along the lines of that can be eye-opening enough, like, wow, maybe that's something I could actually work towards because that would be so much more beneficial to me. I don't have to feel all this stuff that I'm feeling. Putting both of you on the spot, but I'm not sure if that's sort of an approach or something similar that either one of you have ever had. I'd be interested in knowing because I found that that's worked. Joel, I'm wondering if that's from your experience, from your level of education, both of you, if you believe that that approach has some real validity to it.
Absolutely. What you're doing there is connecting someone to themselves in the future. I read one study, it was so interesting. I found out why I pack a two-piece bathing suit instead of a one piece when I go on holiday. And it's
Right.
because when we think of ourselves in the future, we think of a stranger, of a different person. And so it's much easier to let go of your current feelings about yourself and holding on to an object, or hope that the bikini may look good on the new person when you go take it on vacation. I think you're putting people into a place of a different mindset and of hope. I think that's why that's effective.
I'm loving the bikini story. I'm using that. Can I steal that? That's
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that. If you haven't been through losing something big, and we've been talking a lot about grief, you don't know what you're going to gain. You know, the cycles of life, there's birth, death, growth. You make way for new things. So when I had to downsize after marriage from a 3-story house to a 3-bedroom apartment, I had to lose the player piano that had been in my family for multiple generations. That was like a really hard thing for me to give up. But you know what? You come out the other end of it and you're like, I'm alive. I'm still standing. Like, I actually love my apartment. I don't have to cut grass. This place is totally funky. I have way more people coming to visit me now. No one would come visit me when I was an hour outside of the city. So I lost my player piano. That was really hard. But now when I think about the next thing that I'm going to lose, I'm going to go, I didn't think I'd get over the player piano. I'm sure I can get over this next thing. You have to experience the personal stories of resiliency to say, I have it up here. I have the memory. I don't need the object. This town had good things. This new town will have good things too. I don't know how the story is going to end. It's a very Zen Buddhist philosophical kind of thing. People that have had a little bit more hard knocks can kind of say, I'm not still grieving over my girlfriend from grade 8. Like, you know, we do get over things. We do move on.
You have an opportunity to have new things in your life. They're going to have sentimental value when you sometimes get rid of the old stuff, and they can always still be a memory.
My mother was an art teacher. I really love art. And I had boxes and boxes and boxes of everything my children had ever touched, painted, every doily, every Valentine's card, whatever. And then it's like, oh my God, I need a storage locker for my children's art. And then I don't look at it anyways because it's in a storage locker. And my friend said, take a few of your favorite pieces, make a collage and frame it and put it on your wall. And then you see it every day. Maybe there's other symbolic ways that give you something that holds on to that.
That's a great idea. I love the idea of a collage. I think this last question is really important to ask. When would you know that you need professional help?
The human experience is to have highs and lows and pain and suffering, and that is part of being a human being. And I'm always impressed with how much people have deep resources and can really manage. You don't need to suffer. You don't need to meet a clinical diagnosis to get help. Yes, you can meet a clinical diagnosis, which basically means something is long-standing and impeding functioning. But you don't have to wait until it crosses that line. I much prefer the metaphor of you look after your car. You get an oil change, you change the cabin filters, you check the tire pressures. You know, you go to your doctor for your annual checkup, you go to your dentist to get your teeth clean, to get the plaque off. Why wouldn't you go to your therapist and say, I'm going through a life change right now? That could be a divorce, that could be a career change, that could be menopause, I don't know, whatever it might be. We're on your side, and I would rather be there pre-crisis. If you are not feeling easy, why struggle more?
Nicely said. Yeah. Marianne?
Very nice. You know what? I recommend some form of therapy to all my clients. I tell them that one of the top stressors is separation. Often they're also moving. Some have had a change of job too. This is a really good time to use your extended health benefits if you have them, or reach out and get some help. I normalize the process of this being part of the mediation experience.
Okay, great. And I like this idea of go for an emotional checkup. There may be something that's there that you find. We're going to have to end. I don't want to end right now, but we're going to have to. Always so much fun, these workshops. I like to thank both you, Marianne Popescu, and then of course, Alyson Schafer. Thank you so much for joining us today, both of you. Thank you for joining this Inventive Minds Child, Youth, and Family Support Center workshop. Do visit www.inventivekids.com to learn about the many other workshops available coming up soon. You can connect with Inventive Minds via email at inventivekids@gmail.com for any parenting challenges so their professional team can connect with you. Check out a replay of this and many of our other podcasts by searching Inventive Kids. Again, I always say this with a Z. It's not an S, it's with a Z, on YouTube, and the Parent Toolbox on Spotify. You can join the Parent Toolbox Facebook community group today by searching the Parent Toolbox, of course, on Facebook. Thank you very much, everybody who has joined. Can't wait to see both of you again. That was so much fun. I really hope that everybody who's watching and listening gets something out of this. I'm sure you will. And we'll see you all very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.